Okay, place your bets now. Who's going to die of being overheated first, me or my phone? Oh, I just brushed my teeth. That actually tastes really bad. It's pomegranate lemonade today, not tea. I forgot to make iced tea this week, so. Okay, so I read some amazing novels and poetry collections this spring. I found myself a little burnt out. I was a little too tired to work on side gigs after work, but I wasn't too tired to read, so I did that. First up, I read Linger Still by Ashlyn Hunter. We've got poems about ecology, domesticity, and they were so good. I have so many of them tabbed here. And also this is published by Gaspereau Press, Nova Scotia Press, and it's just beautiful. Like, the cover is this kind of linen feeling. The pages are super thick. It's just beautiful. They do such a beautiful job every time. It's such a fun material object to have. So yeah, I think this is gonna go into my list of favorites. Next up, I read Immortality, A Love Story by Dana Schwartz. I read the audiobook. This is a sequel to her book Anatomy, A Love Story. It's a duology about a young Scottish woman in the Regency period. She wants to become a surgeon, but they don't teach women to become surgeons. So she's largely self-taught and needs the help of a resurrection man to procure bodies for her. And so shenanigans ensue. And so yeah, the second book continues her adventures. She goes to London, meets King George the Fourth and the Third, Princess Charlotte, Lord Byron, and she gets involved in this sort of underground, weird cult thing. I don't read a lot of YA fiction normally, but I mean, how can I resist this plot? It's really fun, has my favorite time period, has some really fun characters. Jack, the Resurrection Man, love him. Next, I read Love is a Place, But You Cannot Live There by Jade Wallace. It's a book of poetry published by Guernica Editions. They're based in Montreal. I really enjoyed this. Poems based on place and memory and different theories and different forms of love. Each section is like a different short story in verse. So they're really separate contained narratives all around this theme of finding love in a location. I've got a full review up online and the poet really appreciated it, and so that's always good to hear. And then I read the Copenhagen Trilogy by Tove Ditlevsen. This is actually 3 separate books, and the 3 separate books, Childhood, Youth, and Dependency, are all the autobiography of the author. So this is a memoir autobiography centered on the narrative of her becoming a writer and the different challenges that she's encountered based on her gender, her social class. It's beautifully written, some fantastic figures of speech. My only concern is I don't know that I would have appreciated it as much if I read it as 3 separate books. I felt like it was all part of one narrative. This was actually published in the 60s and 70s. They were all published separately. But it was translated into English in recent years and popularized then. Alright, next up we've got The Nerves by Lena Suksi. This is a Lambda Literary Award winner, which is awesome. And it's different snippets. I guess they're like they're not short stories, they're like maybe flash fiction or prose poetry. But it's all, each section is named after a different person. And they're all different little chronicles of sexual experiences. And it's really fun to read, just pick up a couple here and there. It's about figuring out one's own sexuality through experience. It really centers the tangibility of queerness and identity. And I really like what the inside flap says, that the book is engaging in a queer erotics of language. I think that's a really beautiful way of putting it. I can put it any better than that. This was published by Metatron Press in Montreal. It's a great little gem. I'll keep it in my pocket. Next up is Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. I didn't like it. I read it on a friend's recommendation and I've seen it everywhere. I mean, how can you get over this pitch? Lesbian necromancers explore a haunted Gothic palace in space. That sounds amazing. Um, However, like, beyond the premise, the execution really didn't work for me. I think that's just too many elements for one book to have. And there were like 20 main characters that I felt like I was supposed to be attached to, but I wasn't. I didn't even really feel that much for the love interest. I did like Gideon, the narrator, but so much of the book is just things happening around her that she doesn't understand, and so I don't understand, and I just didn't really have much footing in the story to be engaged with other than just the premise of lesbian necromancers in space. Next, back to poetry, Lent by Kate Cayley. This was published by Book Hug Press and has the most beautiful end pages. Look at that. I really want this wallpaper, the little books and the flowers. And this largely centers like topics of queer family, religion, children. What does it mean to see children growing up in the world that we live in now? And there's a whole section of literary and artistic intertexts. I really want to revisit some of these poems. I feel like I didn't get enough time with some of them individually when I was reading it cover to cover. I might go back and focus more in depth on some. Next, I kept reading more poems. This is The Choice is Real by Jason Keary, another Metatron Press book. This is actually their newest release, I think. It just came out in May. And I think this was my favorite book that I read this month. And I read some great books this month. This book focuses on trans and queer identities framed through myths, Disney myths, classical myths. There's found poems from Disney songs like in The Little Mermaid, and also like references to like Greek mythology and legends. Keary has just such a strong grasp on imagery and those really punchy lines that make you gasp while you're reading it. It was fantastic. I loved it. We'll be returning to it for sure. And then I read Happy Hour by Marlo Granados, which is totally a summer book. I would love to have picked it up now, kind of when it's really warm out. I did read it in April because I just couldn't resist. But I thought it was really fun. It's not for everyone. It's about these two young women who go to New York. They don't have a visa, so they're sort of getting by selling their old clothes and hanging out with rich people who will let them house sit their beautiful houses and will buy like French 75s for them. It's really fun. It's really sleek and chic and made me feel very uncool. I have the American edition because I picked it up at a secondhand bookstore, but it was originally published by Flying Books in Toronto. Then I read The Master by Colm Tóibín. This book surprised me. I wasn't expecting to enjoy it as much as I did. It's a portrait of Henry James, the 19th century author. And I do love Henry James, but I was a little scared that it would fall into the trap that a lot of biopics do, where like everything in the artist's life has to be some way correlated to an event from their most famous works. And that really wasn't happening here. Tóibín is obviously a very talented writer. He sort of navigated around that. He wasn't doing that with this story. He was telling the story of a man who's grieving, who's questioning like the point of art and his legacy, who's grappling with his attraction to men, and it's about like artistic failure and successes. And it was beautifully written. I really loved the end. I would recommend picking it up if you like, especially if you like Henry James, but also if you like reading about writers without it being too heavy-handed. Next up, I've got Couplets by Maggie Milner. This is a pretty new release, and I thought this was genius. So Milner takes the rhyming couplet, which is a really outdated poetic form for contemporary readers and writers, and she makes it contemporary. She makes it new. So it's a novel in verse about this woman who is with a man, but she starts desiring this woman, and her navigating her desires and her identity and power and sex, and it's just really really good. Um, I think half of the pages in my copy are dog-eared. It was so good. I just devoured this one. I think I read it in a sitting and a half. It was so good. And then I read Model Disciple by Michael Pryor. This was published by Vehicle Press in Montreal, and they actually just celebrated their 50th anniversary. So happy birthday, Vehicle Press. It's about like the legacy of Japanese Canadian heritage and really figuring out what one's identity means when it comes with all of this extra baggage that came before you even existed. And Michael Pryor's newer book actually focuses a lot more on the specifics of his history, of his family history, and I really want to pick that up because a lot of these poems were super great, and I would really love to see more depth and more detail, specifically around that complicated mixed heritage. And then I read A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. I'd actually never read it. This is the one that, of course, starts with, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, it was the age of wisdom, the age of foolishness, it was the epoch of belief, it was the epoch of incredulity, it was the season of light, it was the season of darkness, it was the spring of hope, it was the winter of despair, we had everything before us, we had nothing before us, we were all going direct to heaven, we were all going direct to the other way. In short, the period was so far like the present period that some of its noisiest authorities this time being received for good or for evil, in the superlative degree of comparison only. I did kind of love this one. It's set across London and Paris, the two cities, during the French Revolution, and follows this handful of interconnected characters, and their connections to each other become more and more intertwined. And I cried at the end. It was so good. The end sentence deserves as much fame as the opening sentence. So would recommend picking it up, especially if you're a fan of Les Mis. Has a lot of the same themes. The next book I read I don't have on me because as soon as I finished it, I lent it to a friend, and that is Boy Parts by Eliza Clark. It just came out in Canada. It came out a few years ago in the UK, and I had seen it around the Bookstagram, BookTok, BookTube worlds, and I thought, oh, I'm gonna love that whenever I pick it up. I know it's old hat at this point, but I'm a sucker still for those like unhinged fictional women novels, and this is certainly one of them. So it follows a woman who takes these sort of fetishy, erotic photos of men. She's part of the art world in London. She sells her portraits. Things are going pretty well for her until they very much are not. I read this in one sitting, as the author encouraged me to do, and it was so worth it. It was so worth the pain that it caused my eyes of just reading the book like this for hours. And then lastly, I read Paradise Rot by Jenny Haval. This one, how do I sell this one to you? Mushrooms, pee, and guts. So it's about this young woman who goes to the UK for university, and she moves into this place. It's a former brewery, and something's off about it and about her roommate. If you like those sort of consuming themes, like being consumed, a character consuming others as a sort of creation myth or transformation. I realized none of those were really sentences or like anything that makes any sense. So that's Paradise Rot. I didn't like Gideon the Ninth very much, but I loved all the others. I have some new favorites, and it was just a great season for reading all around. So let me know what you read this spring, what you're looking forward to reading this summer. I personally will be tackling some of my bigger books and taking them out to the park, and maybe I'll read War and Peace. So good luck with whatever you've got going on this week, and I'll see you soon.